Ladies and gentlemen, President Donald Trump single-handedly tanked Twitter forever. He was like a sledgehammer that broke that company into pieces. And you might say, oh my God, that's hyperbole. Oh my goodness, it's up today. What are you talking about? They are forced now because of Trump. And even before, it was not only one person, obviously. But they're forced to go into a subscription-based business model. They obsessed and provided a forum, this alternate reality, this cyber world, this cauldron of discontent and angst and frustration and contempt for one human being. So their business model for the past 4 years or forever has been, hey, you know what? It's a service that's free. You can sign on. And that's how their, Facebook grew. That's how any website or platform, social media platform grows. Instagram, whatever. You don't go ahead and advertise a subscription-based model if your platform is growing exponentially and the sky's the limit. So the revenues are derived from the user growth. The user growth is either, some people have alleged it's completely fabricated. So you're trusting the data from Twitter when they say, oh, we have all these monetizable users and our user growth grew, and this is how many people actually log on to their account every day within the U.S. and around the world. Well, you're trusting them with that information. There's no way to verify. There's really no way to verify how fast and how, if Twitter is truly growing exponentially in terms of users that it can monetize. So daily users that they can derive advertising revenue from. There's a phrase that they use. But anyway, there was a recent lawsuit that they settled that their insurance company, that resulted in their insurance company giving them a lot of money. Well, not a lot, but like millions of dollars. But they have to now address the issues within the lawsuit. One of the things alleged was that they fabricated their user growth numbers, which is really hilarious because we're seeing now it's no longer going to be only just a free platform, which is what you would think a social media company would want. It's now a subscription-based. Now they're going to venture into subscriptions. Why? Because they're not growing fast enough in their ad revenues because of the pandemic, but also because of the Trump ban and alienating 74 million supporters of President Trump and millions around the world, and doing a whole bunch of other things. Being duplicitous and disingenuous with how it filters news. They suspended the New York Post's account for a legitimate news story. So hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. This is a labor of love, and you will actually see all the links will be below. We'll start off, before we get, Twitter purchased a company today to start its subscription, its new business model. So Trump, single-handedly forced them to adopt a new business model, which is not, you're not going to grow exponentially. You're not going to grow exponentially if you have a subscription-based model. Okay? This is really interesting. So hit subscribe to this channel right now. Get this segment going. It's really, really interesting. You have to ask yourself, if they're doing so well, why are they now trying to get subscriptions? And who on earth is going to pay every month or every year for any service provided by Twitter? Especially when we know that there's one standard of censorship for one ideology and just completely, they promote one viewpoint, one political viewpoint, and they try to suppress another political viewpoint. The New York Post, suspending the New York Post's account for completely bogus reasons is one example. The news story on Caligula, Biden's son's laptop, was a legitimate news story from the New York Post. We know this now because Politico ran is running articles now on Biden's son being investigated, since 2018? For laundering and for potential laundering, taxes, business entities he was associated with. That was a legitimate news story that Twitter helped sweep under the rug just because they, along with other media giants, wanted a specific outcome. But here, this is really interesting. CNN, the trusted name in news. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. Get this segment going. Twitter says it's looking at subscription options as ad revenues drop sharply. Now, a lot of these companies, they say, hey, we're purchasing this newsletter. So they purchased this company today, Twitter. And they said, we're starting this new subscription-based service. And the corporate spin is, this is actually really good. No, it's a sign that the company and the company will eventually go under because it's not growing enough to generate revenues, and it's not growing enough to warrant the increase in debt. They went from like $1.8 billion in debt, something like I can show you this. They went from $1.79 billion in debt in 2018 to 3.46. Sorry. $1.79 billion in 2019 to $3.46 billion in 2020. How much debt does Twitter carry? This is Simply Wall Street. How much debt does Twitter carry? You can click on the graph below, but it shows that as of September 2020, Twitter had $3.46 billion of debt, an increase on $1.7 billion over 1 year. So then they say, well, they have a lot of cash, but they're not growing. And their debt is increasing exponentially. They're not really, their revenue, their user base is not increasing exponentially, but their debt is. So what does that tell you about the stock or the company? Again, you know what? I could be wrong. Twitter might be the best thing for your retirement account. It could be the best stock of all time. I'm not giving investment advice. It could be the best company ever. What are the chances? I told you 2 years ago to delete your Twitter account. But here, Twitter says it's looking, and I deleted my Twitter account. I do not have a Twitter account. I have an imbecile on Twitter impersonating me, getting everything, distorting and twisting everything, actually committing crimes. And Amazon knows who this person is because he illegally shared my books from Amazon. So that's a criminal act. Doesn't matter where you live, whether you're in the U.S. or abroad. But anyway, so I do not have a Twitter account. I told people 2 years ago, I left Twitter 2 years ago, I said, delete your Twitter account, delete your Facebook account. You don't need to be in this cyber reality. But here, Twitter says it's looking at subscription options as ad revenues drop sharply. July 23rd, 2020. Twitter is actively exploring additional ways to make money from its users, including by considering a subscription model, CEO Jack Dorsey said Thursday. The move comes as Twitter suffers a sharp decline in its core advertising business. It's not just the pandemic. It's the fact that Twitter is a one-trick pony. It was the only reason people went on that platform was to see what Trump was saying. Now, President Trump was able to use Twitter to his advantage in the beginning of his presidency and before 2016. What happened was he fell for a trap. Twitter is a cauldron of negative emotions swirling around this alternate universe, this cyber reality where people can hide. You have to understand the minds of many liberals and some on the right as well. But generally, you have these conniving, snarky, petulant, malicious, oftentimes liberal, sometimes conservative trolls that get this sense of enjoyment by this sense of accomplishment because perhaps their lives are so devoid of meaning that they hide behind fake profiles and they just try to annoy people. And so that's one of the reasons that the company will go under, because that's what it's known for. The perception, maybe that's not the reality. Maybe Twitter is a fantastic place. Maybe I'm wrong. But the perception is that it's a place that you can actually, from a cyber perspective, harm people and unfortunately oftentimes get away with it. That's one way, that's one perception of Twitter. And it's one of the reasons the company's going to tank eventually and go bankrupt and become like the MySpace of political media or whatever, cyberspace. But, quote, "You'll likely see some tests this year of various approaches," Dorsey told analysts on an investor call held to discuss the company's second quarter earnings result. Earlier this month, rumors flared about a paid Twitter option after the company posted a job opening focused on building a subscription platform. Now, that is the worst news for any company that its growth is the company is championed because of the belief that it's going to grow exponentially and that people want to use its service, a free service. So their whole thing is, oh, well, we're growing so fast and we have so many users around the world, and that's enough to generate the revenue to overcome the $3 billion plus in debt. The fact that we're growing, the debt is growing like $1 billion plus to $2 billion every year. But the whole point of this segment is that because of Trump and other issues, they're forced to do away with their prior business model, and they're now looking at subscriptions because what made them an exciting company is gone. People simply don't log on to their account and buy things or look at the advertising, which is how they make most of their revenue. So now they're saying, oh gosh, what do we do? Well, we'll charge people who already don't want anything to do with our website or our platform. People are leaving Twitter. People are deactivating their Twitter account. And so in response to that, they say, well, you know what we'll do? We will, instead of maybe focusing on an even-handed approach to news where you treat conservatives in the same manner you treat liberals. See, that could probably help the stock or a company. What they're doing is they're saying, oh, people don't want to use our site. People are leaving. Our user growth isn't, what we expected. Our revenues aren't what we expected. We'll start a subscription-based service and have people pay for a platform they're leaving. Does that make any sense? And again, I could be wrong. It could be fantastic. Oh my God, so great. But does that make any sense to you? Here, Twitter acquiring newsletter publishing company Review. Wow. Twitter on Tuesday said it has acquired Review, a newsletter platform. Okay, so for writers and publishers, the deal marks Twitter's first step into building an long-form content experience on Twitter and its first foray into subscription revenue. This is the worst possible long-term thing for the company. See, Facebook bought Instagram. That's different. Instagram, is huge among young people, and young people, people in their 20s, the teens, 20s, even early 30s, these are the people that drive growth within a social media platform. So, let's see. Facebook. Facebook bought Instagram in 2012. Okay, 6 years later, it's safe to say it was the company's smartest purchase ever. So that was an amazing, but like Facebook, that's also a cauldron of discontent, but at least like it's a much better company. Why? Not that I like Facebook. I don't have a Facebook account. The only good thing about Facebook is you can reach out to people who were dear to you or important to you at a certain point in your life that you've lost track of. And maybe if you really want, you could see what people ate for dinner, and oh my God, this is great, and like, see what your neighbor's, friends, dog looks like, or what kind of, who knows, like it's a completely different experience than Twitter, which is just, oh my God, endless argument and frustration. But here, it's now worth $100 billion, so they made so Facebook's going to be around a lot longer. The Facebook platform itself won't be that important, but Twitter won't even be around like 4, 5, 6 years from now. I don't think Twitter will even be around because of the reasons I explained. But they don't have the difference is like you have Twitter with a subscription based. Facebook never needed a subscription based platform because it just grew on its own, or the revenues were generated just from a free service. If your revenues aren't generated from a free service on a social media platform, you're up the creek. So they purchased a newsletter for writers and publishers. Well, there aren't that many writers and publishers, so they're not going to derive that much revenue from a subscription-based platform. But here, this is a Forbes article that was taken down, and it's really hilarious. It's really, really hilarious. In the article is, you can still find these. The article's up. Twitter is the worst company on planet Earth. Here's how to bet against the stock and deactivate your account. Forbes, Jim Collins. This gentleman wrote a fantastic article. Why Forbes took it down, I have no clue. But it's so true. It's the worst company on planet Earth. It really is. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is a labor of love because I think Twitter is just the worst platform of all time. If Satan, designed a social media platform, it would be that company. Why would you go into an alternate reality where you have fake profiles just there with, people touching themselves in ecstasy? Oh, I'm pretending to be this person. Like, you have nothing better to do in your life? My God almighty, you have nothing better to do? Read a book. Do something. You have nothing better to do than to disparage other people. Or just like, let's say, the blue check mark. Oh my goodness, did you see like the preaching and the sermons and the moralizing and the pontificating and the judgment and the condemnation? And it's basically the 80s. You had televangelists. Now you have people on Twitter pretending that they're the moral voices of our generation. You have AOC saying, oh yeah, this is not fair. And then Yad Vashem refuted her revisionist claims. And I wrote about that in the Jerusalem Post. Read my Jerusalem Post op-ed on AOC and why Yad Vashem refuted her historically not only inaccurate revisionist history, which is extremely dangerous. But Twitter provides a platform for anyone to spew the most horrendous nonsense. And it's just it's a forum for endless arguments, and there's no like honest debate. It's just long threads full of vitriol and venom and anger and frustration and people getting upset with one another. It's not just about politics and Trump or Democrats. It's like any topic at all. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Trump forced them to abandon their business model. Think about that for a second. How does one man, it's not just Trump, but how does one man in large part force a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar corporation to just abandon its business model? And what kind of business model did it have to begin with? If they're looking at subscriptions now because ad revenue's tanking, what do you think the future holds for a company that's already alienated tens of millions of people in this country and around the world? Give me your thoughts. Thank you so very, very much. I'll be back later this evening.